Welcome, beautiful Paris Saint-Germain family. As you can see by the title and by the thumbnail, in today's video we'll be discussing FC Barcelona more on a positive note. Are FC Barcelona actually going to come back? Because I have the feeling, because of the report I've just seen and some other stuff we'll go through 5 reasons why FC Barcelona will be back in very imminent time. We'll take a look at the problems that Barcelona have been having so far this season, how they are automatically going to be fixed or fixed in other ways. And this statement from FC Barcelona is absolutely huge. So let's jump straight into it. First report we got to look at has to do with Lamine Yamal, because he's the number 10. He's the face of FC Barcelona, finished second in the Ballon d'Or last year. This dude represents FC Barcelona more than Messi at the moment. Breaking, Barca and Lamine Yamal have agreed to cancel the interview that was scheduled for this Tuesday with the French streamer Lamine Yamal. Barca recommended it and the player accepted. Lamine Yamal was set to have an interview with Lamine Yamal straight after, obviously discussing the El Clasico game, what he said before the game, what the Madrid players did, what his thoughts were, what did he say when he meant let's go down to the tunnel, a bunch of childish stuff. Like Lamine Yamal, you're not, you are indirectly a celebrity, but you're a celebrity because you're a football player. What he's doing is he's not doing his main job. I felt similar stuff with Kylian Mbappe at Paris Saint-Germain. He wasn't fully focused on football. He wasn't fully motivated on football. It was not his main priority, especially in his last 2 seasons at the club. What was mostly important for him was his PR, was his self-image, was the money he was earning, the sponsors, and doing what he wants to do. But here, Barcelona are finally stepping in. It took way too long. It should have never taken this long. But this step from FC Barcelona shows 2 stuff. First of all, Lamine Yamal accepted it immediately, which is great stuff. While Yamal understands from this request from FC Barcelona is he gotta stop doing what he's doing. He gotta start putting the motivation and hunger into his football instead of being an influencer. That's not your job, Lamine Yamal. You could have chosen to become an influencer, but you decided to become a football player. You're the second highest paid player at FC Barcelona. You cannot be joking around. You cannot be kidding around. You cannot be wasting stuff and doing all of this. And second of all, it's from FC Barcelona, because enough is enough. That's a statement right here I can see from FC Barcelona. They have probably felt that Lamine Yamal was doing, useless, irrelevant stuff for a very long time. But finally, they stepped in. They put their foot down and said, Lamine Yamal, enough is enough. And this is a great statement from the club, because I've seen so many FC Barcelona fans backing what Lamine Yamal is doing. Oh, you're rage baiting the Madrid players. Oh, look, you got a 33-year-old Courtois crying about an 18-year-old. Like, you think this is funny? You just lost El Clasico, but you're laughing about it because Yamal rage baited about a bunch of players. When will you understand the main objective of this sport is to win and win trophies? It's not about rage baiting and being an influencer and people being mad at you. Quite the opposite. You don't want negative PR. You don't want negative attention. And that's exactly what Lamine Yamal brought to FC Barcelona. And this was said as well. Breakdown on everything Catalan media published on Lamine Yamal today. Barcelona very disappointed with his recent statements and actions off the pitch. Completely understandable. Still, Barca fans defending the actions though. They believe he gave Real Madrid players an extra motivation, which was crucial to their win at the Bernabeu. The club thinks it's an immature mistake and have assigned his agent Jorge Mendes to supervise his social media and interview appearances. Basically, Lamine Yamal is unraised. That has been known for quite a while because his father has now stepped in. His father has not done the job. His father got him when he was like 18 years of age. He's basically more like an older brother to Lamine Yamal, where Lamine Yamal has gotten a lot of his, how he acts as a person, he's gotten it from his dad. So Barca, what they're doing is they're taking the role. They're not the stepfather. They're the father that stepped up. FC Barcelona is stepping up to basically defend Lamine Yamal from the actions that he's doing. Lamine Yamal clearly is so immature, he does not understand what his negative actions are contributing to. So FC Barcelona and even his agent Jorge Mendes are set to supervise. The word supervise is basically all the time used for parents. You supervise your kids. So they are, taking the role of his father, which his father clearly couldn't have, to supervise his social media and interview appearances. They think his private life has been too exposed recently and want him to focus only on football. Wow, what surprising. Obviously, there will still be Barca fans disagreeing with all of these messages from the club, even though this has been clear for a very long time. And I've said multiple times, Lamine Yamal should strictly focus on football. But now we're finished about Yamal. It's a great message from the club towards Lamine Yamal, and a great that Yamal immediately accepted it. It's going to be very interesting in the upcoming weeks. Do we see a major change in Lamine Yamal's behavior, what he says off the pitch and what he does on the pitch as well, because he hasn't been performing so well that season so far. You know, a lot of the games, he's basically had Salah-esque games where he hides, you know, a mid or a stinker with a GA or something. But that started to run out, especially in the big games where you need to be even better to get GA and so on. So it'll be very interesting if this affects, because FC Barcelona will need Lamine Yamal to play at his best football. Lamine Yamal is one of FC Barcelona's best players. He's the face of the club. If he doesn't perform, that's a negative thing for the club. But if he performs, is an extremely positive thing for FC Barcelona. But let's get into more stuff, why I believe FC Barcelona will be back apart from this. So, first thing to take a look at is the attack of FC Barcelona. How is it comparable after, I believe, 13-14 games so far this season comparable to last season? Last season, they scored 43 games in 13-14 games. FC Barcelona this season have scored 34 games. That's 9 goals minus. If you take a look at the XG, 34.8 last season, 32.1 this season. Only a 2.7 difference in XG, which means they were heavily overperforming in goals last season compared to this season. 34 goals on 32.1, only 1.9 comparison, whilst the other one is nearly a 10 goal difference between the XG and the goals scored. And why is that? Because most big teams that have big players over-expect their XG. Why? Because they have top quality finishers. And that's exactly what FC Barcelona have been missing so far at the beginning of the season. I know that Lewandowski has played a couple of games and has been poor, but if Lewandowski can get back to at least 70-80% of the form he was in last season, it would be absolutely incredible for FC Barcelona, because the Robert Lewandowski and Rafinha, goals only, no assists, no goal contributions, only goals scored. In the first 13-14 games of last season, scored 28 goals in all competitions for FC Barcelona, but have only scored 9 goals this season. Obviously, a lot of injuries and so on, but it just shows how much they're missing Rafinha and Lewandowski up top. You know, last season, Lewandowski and Rafinha got so disrespected just to push the Yamal Glaze bandwagon after that Inter tie, especially, saying that, oh, Yamal. But what we've seen clearly this season is Yamal cannot carry a team. He doesn't have that ability yet. He can't carry a team, and especially his goal scoring. He's only scored 3 goals so far this season, 2 of them being penalties as well. Barcelona are clearly missing their 2 best finishers and their 2 most clinical players in attack. Lewandowski is already back in training. Rafinha obviously got a little bit of a relapse with Barca trying to push him to play the El Clasico. But as soon as Barca can start fielding Rafinha, Lewandowski and Yamal in attack, the attack will improve immensely, because they have been missing them a lot, especially in the league campaign. Champions League, they got 6 out of 9 points. But in the league campaign, Lewandowski scored the 2nd most goals in La Liga last season. Rafinha, maybe it was 3rd, maybe it was 4th. These are crucial goals FC Barcelona are missing. Rafinha was even Barcelona's La Liga player of the season and came 2nd in behind Ousmane Dembele in the Champions League player of the season. So these are clearly misses FC Barcelona have had since the beginning of the season. Lamine Yamal, for example, scored 6 goals last season and only 3 goals so far this season. And this is in all competitions, including national teams. And he takes penalties this season. So it's actually 6 non-penalty goals last season compared to only 1 goal non-penalty goal this season, which shows that Lamine Yamal needs Lewandowski and Rafinha, not just for his playmaking, but even for his goal scoring, because Rafinha and Lewandowski take a lot of attention, and then Lamine Yamal maybe has more 1v1s, more open areas to conduct in. But obviously, Lamine Yamal has also been injured in the beginning of the season, which also shows his less goal scoring streak. Next up to talk about is obviously the defense. We talked about the attack. Next up is the defense. FC Barcelona have conceded 16 goals so far this season compared to 13 last season. Not the biggest difference. XAG 18.1 to 14.1. Still a difference you don't want to see. And we've seen that Barcelona defensively this season have been exposed at a higher rate than they were exposed last season. Why? Because teams are getting more used to defending against them and so on. But FC Barcelona have clearly had defensive personnel problems so far this season. And obviously, the biggest one was the Inigo Martinez departure. I felt he was one of the best centre-backs in Europe's top 5 leagues last season. Definitely FC Barcelona's best defender last season. And he obviously left the club for a free without Barca replacing him or even trying to replace him. They could have tried to replace Inigo Martinez, but they opted to go into the season without replacing him. And that has clearly been a big weakness for FC Barcelona in this season. I think Inigo Martinez, the impact that he had and the ability that he showcased was really important. But then it was also the experience. This was one of the leaders in the FC Barcelona team. You can't forget, FC Barcelona is one of the youngest teams in the world. Inigo Martinez, this experience is extremely needed and it's definitely missed. Obviously, Inigo Martinez left because he had a clause in his contract where Barca could not say anything about it, which once again goes to show Barca's negotiation definitely negatively affects the club all the time. Second up is the centre-back rotation. Hansi Flick this season, I mean, it's very unsure what his centre-back partnership is. At the moment, maybe you would guess it's Eric Garcia and Cubarsí because they started the Barca and Madrid game. But this has been an occurring issue for FC Barcelona so far this season. With Inigo Martinez's departure, Hansi Flick really hasn't been able to find the player to play next to Cubarsí, and sometimes even Cubarsí is not playing at the right level. So he's been mismatching between all of these. Christensen obviously has played a little bit, but then has gotten some very weird injuries, like 3-day injury, 4-day injury here and there, which just shows his body and physically absolutely cooked. So this is something that FC Barcelona have to immediately fix. Hansi Flick has to pick two centre-backs to play all the time. It's really important to have a centre-back partnership. That is shown at every single club. When you have different centre-backs playing all the time, it will definitely affect the backline. I think the best, in my opinion, has always been Araujo and Cubarsí, or Araujo and Eric Garcia. Both Eric Garcia and Cubarsí are better with the ball than they're at defending, whilst Araujo is better at defending than when he is at the ball. And that's the best centre-back partnership. You want one that's great with the ball, maybe a little bit less at defending, and one that's great at defending, maybe a little bit less on the ball. You need Araujo, physical ability and so on. And I think Araujo, obviously, maybe the offside trap, he can talk about that and so on. But I think Araujo's biggest weakness at the moment is his confidence. You know, his confidence has been very low since that Paris Saint-Germain game, even Inter tie last season. But Hansi Flick hasn't given him confidence at all. But I think Araujo, when we look back at the level Araujo was playing in before, you know, the mistake, PSG and a red card and all of that, Araujo was one of the best centre-backs in the world. And I think Flick, instead of just using these other two centre-backs, he should give Araujo an actual opportunity. We saw Araujo and Cubarsí versus Newcastle, and that was probably FC Barcelona's best defensive performance this season against a tough team in a tough stadium. So I think this is something he has to pick. Obviously, FC Barcelona can go into the January transfer window, maybe look for an opportunity centre-back signing, but I doubt that's going to happen for FC Barcelona. Another huge thing has been Juan Garcia. He's just joined the club, but he's had such a huge impact already. Barcelona only conceded 5 goals in their first 7 games of the season with Juan Garcia in goal. Then he got injured, and Barcelona have conceded 11 goals in 6 games. Fun stat, since Juan Garcia got injured, FC Barcelona haven't managed to keep a single clean sheet, which just shows the importance of Juan Garcia. And in this period, it's not like Szczesny has been complete garbage. It just shows how great Juan Garcia is. I mean, he's performing at like top 3 goalkeeper in the world level in those first 7 games for FC Barcelona. So him obviously coming back will be absolutely huge. I mean, just look at this. Goals conceded per game, 0.7 goes to 1.8. It just shows the huge importance in Juan Garcia, and he's obviously soon going to be back for FC Barcelona, which is a huge thing for them. Next up, I want to talk about is the midfield. I think it's way too much heavy reliance on Pedri. Pedri is an incredible midfielder, incredible football player, but it's way too much reliance on Pedri. The other midfielders have to start stepping up. You know, Pedri will finally, for the first time ever, get some kind of rest in the next upcoming La Liga game because he was sent out versus Real Madrid. If not, he would have started that game even though he was pushing and puffing and everything in that Real Madrid game. It's way too much heavy reliance on Pedri, and the other midfielders just have to step up. I'm getting similarities to Marco Verratti at Paris Saint-Germain. I'm not comparing the players or anything, both unbelievable midfielders, but what I'm seeing is heavy reliance on a midfielder. You know, Verratti, yes, in the beginning he had Pastore, Matuidi, Thiago Motta, but when they left the club, Verratti was paired up with Paredes, with Lassana Diarra, with Idrissa Gueye, with Danilo Pereira, with Gregorio Krychowiak, absolute bumps. And, you know, Verratti had to do everything by himself. The progressive carries, the progressive passes, the progressive this, the progressive that, the defensiveness, the key passes, everything. And I feel the exact same with Pedri at FC Barcelona. I mean, look at his midfield compatriots. Who there do you look at? He's similar level to Pedri. No one. You know, Gavi, top player, but he hasn't been the same since his ACL. Casado had a good first 4 months last season, 3 months, and since then hasn't been performing at that level. Fermin is coming in with some great fire this season. Dani Olmo, obviously the injury, bad performances. Frenkie de Jong, I mean, I still don't understand. We'll come to de Jong, but I still don't understand how FC Barcelona employed de Jong in 2025 and just extended him. And then you have Bernal, who's a hot talent coming through the academy. If he's going to get more minutes, I think Bernal, Pedri could actually be a very good double pivot. But Flick has to give that confidence to Bernal to see if he can showcase his ability at this top stage. But the midfield at Barca definitely needs to be fixed. I think Fermin, with the form he's performing so far this season, hat-trick and everything, you play Fermin, you play Pedri. But the player next to Pedri, Flick has to decide on. Flick has to decide on, and it's not De Jong. It's clearly not De Jong. I remember after the Newcastle game, Barca fans and, the Barca glazing media calling Pedri De Jong the best double pivot in the world. And then we saw De Jong, Pedri versus PSG, and then we saw them versus Madrid. And what I saw was Pedri trying his absolute best, but still not being able to play his best. Why? Because he's playing with a cone. He's playing with a bum. He's playing with someone that actually does not improve Pedri. I mean, what is it De Jong can do that Pedri can't? For example, underneath João Neves and Vitinha. Vitinha is the best midfielder in the world, but I can name you stuff João Neves can do way better than Vitinha. There is nothing De Jong can do that is better than Pedri. It's basically having this, you have Pedri and then you have a identical, worse version of Pedri next to him. De Jong is neither good defensively, neither good offensively. Yeah, but De Jong, I still don't understand how Barcelona extended him. Especially when you look at the money situation Barcelona are in and the 101 rule. A lot of that has to be about the wage you pay to players. De Jong has a really high wage at FC Barcelona. And second of all, De Jong was one of the sellable players in Barca. Barca has a lot of great players, but De Jong is one of the players that has a great value. And I think a lot of Barca fans and Barca themselves will be okay selling him. But for some reason, Barcelona decided not to sell De Jong. Then I want to talk about the depth. The depth is a problem at FC Barcelona. And obviously, the most valid explanation for that is the economical. It's very hard for FC Barcelona to have a strong competitive starting 11 and at the same time have a strong competitive bench and rotation for that starting 11. Minutes-wise, last season, out of 5,400 available minutes, as you can see the minutes that were played, Rafinha, Lamine Yamal, Lewandowski, all these players played so many minutes last season. Pedri 4.6, Rafinha 4.6, and Yamal nearly 4.6. And one funny thing about these were the top highest minutes allocated players last season for FC Barcelona. And one other thing you have to addition is that FC Barcelona played probably with the highest intensity in world football, more intense than PSG, more intense than everyone, because the football that Flick wants them to play is absolutely insane. And all of their starters got rinsed last season with minutes, which obviously affected their performance in the upcoming season. When you look at all of these 7 players, Inigo's obviously left Barca, so we don't know about him. Koundé has not been performing at his level so far this season. Yamal has not been performing at his level, plus he's been injured. Lewandowski has not been performing at his level, plus been injured. Rafinha has been performing ish at his level, but has been injured. Kubarsi has definitely not played at his level. And Pedri is Pedri. Pedri is the only one here that played so much, is still playing so much this season, but is still performing at a high level, which just shows the quality of Pedri. But this, for me, has been a big issue for the start for FC Barcelona this season, because they were overplayed last season with the highest intensity in football. Obviously, the good thing for Barca here is this is worrying for the beginning of the season, but less worrying when the big stage of the Champions League comes, when the knockout stages comes. I think all of these players will have a rest. Think about Rafinha. He's been injured, but he's technically rested. Lewandowski, injured, but technically rested. So I think all of these will come back with better motivation and so on. To take a look at Paris Saint-Germain, for example, out of 5,220 allocated minutes, only Patron Hakimi played more than 4,000 minutes. Why? Because Paris Saint-Germain has great squad depth. Second of all, Luis Enrique trusts his squad depth. There's some games I'm like, why is Luis Enrique rotating too much? And then we get a 2-1 victory and move away with 3 points. Why? Because Luis Enrique takes that risk. It's very clear that Hansi Flick does not want to take the risk out of rotation. And I think that's, a critique on Hansi Flick, his management, his game, that he has to improve on. Hansi Flick needs to start trusting the depth of his squad, but obviously then it comes to Laporta and Deco. Laporta has to fix the economical situation quicker and quicker, and Deco has to improve the squad for Hansi Flick. I think Rashford, very good signing. You get him on a loan, cheap, and Rashford has the most GA for FC Barcelona this season. So a little bit more of those smart signings. I think the depth this season is better than it was last season for FC Barcelona, so Barca won't have similar problems at the beginning of next season. But this explains the poor start for FC Barcelona so far this season. And lastly but not least, I want to discuss Hansi Flick. He's the manager of FC Barcelona. When it goes really well, Hansi Flick gets praised. When it goes really bad, Hansi Flick gets absolutely torched and cooked. And I think it's a 50-50. I think FC Barcelona so far this season, you can definitely critique a lot of it on Hansi Flick. I think towards the end of last season, we saw a lot of teams, especially the La Liga mid-table small clubs, getting an understanding how to play against Hansi Flick's FC Barcelona, playing the balls in behind, sitting back, making it very hard for FC Barcelona. And Flick has to adjust. Flick has to adjust. I'm not saying change tactics. I'm not saying stop playing high line, do this, but you got to do adjustments. Maybe play the high line a little bit deeper. Maybe stop abusing the offside trap as many times. Maybe do this, maybe do that. Small adjustments, tweak your system to make it more unpredictable and better. That's one thing that Luis Enrique always talks about. He wants complete unpredictability at Paris Saint-Germain so that the opponent doesn't know how to play against Paris Saint-Germain. So I think that's a really crucial thing that Hansi Flick has to work on in the upcoming weeks at FC Barcelona. Small tweaks, small adjustments to make yourself unpredictable for the opponent. But Hansi Flick is not just the manager, he's also the leader of this team. With FC Barcelona being such a young team, he has a huge role of this team. Similar stuff with Luis Enrique at Paris Saint-Germain. Paris Saint-Germain, when you look at the squad, Marquinhos is the only one 30 years and older, which means it's a very young squad, unexperienced, with not many leaders. And that's where Luis Enrique is key, because he's an absolute tier leader. He gives confidence to the young players, to the older players, has a great rotation and so on. And I think Hansi Flick needs to start taking that kind of role. He was used in his previous job when he worked with Bayern. It was a really old, experienced squad. Thomas Müller, Lewandowski, Thiago Alcantara, Jerome Boateng, Manuel Neuer. These are players that you don't need to raise. These are players that you don't need to raise in that kind of way because they are already raised. They are already mature. But Hansi Flick has to understand he's with a different club with, different history, different time plan, different timelines. And Hansi Flick has to start taking more of a leader role in this Barca team, in my opinion, and, back the players even more. Not that he's not doing it, but do it at an even higher rate. But to defend Hansi Flick a little bit, we've seen the reports coming out before that he feels he's losing a little bit of the locker room due to the egos. One thing with the Hansi Flick football that is really important, when you play a high line, it's extremely important for you to press high. Because if you have a high line and you're not pressing high, you become like this, and a ball over the top is really easy. Why teams in the beginning of last season didn't play these kinds of long balls against Barca is because Barca was pressing high. When you press high, it's very hard for them to get a ball, look up, see the pass, and make the pass. I think that has been an issue at FC Barcelona this season, which I've seen even many Barca fans talk about, is the pressing. And Hansi Flick has clearly said that this has to do with egos. Even Pedri himself walked out in an interview and said, we shouldn't have egos. Everyone should put the team above themselves, not themselves above the team, and so on. So I think that's something not a lot of people are talking about. Yes, the Hansi Flick system maybe looks a little bit bad, but is it due to Hansi Flick or is it due to the players? Because we saw the same exact system last season and Barcelona were not performing this way. So I think sometimes Flick gets harsh critiques from the media and the Barca fan base when actually sometimes it's the players that deserve that. When you look at Yamal, Rafinha, Lewandowski, even Ferran Torres, their pressing has been nowhere close as good as last season. So that's something that Hansi Flick indirectly gets critique for when it's actually FC Barcelona's fault. It's players that gotta improve. So I think this is a moment, after the defeat to Paris Saint-Germain, after the defeat to Real Madrid, it's a moment for the Barca players, Barca fans, Hansi Flick, Barca management, Laporta, Deco, everyone there to come together and say, you know what? We are at a really bad point at the moment when you look at the optics, but it will not get worse from here. And, sometimes you need that kind of motivation. I think FC Barcelona, going from a club that was 2 seasons in the Europa League, and then they had that season when they lost to Paris Saint-Germain, and then last season, won a domestic treble, reached the Champions League semi-final for the first time since 2019. It was a huge season for FC Barcelona. And sometimes it's a bit hard to continue that motivation and hunger after a season like that. And that's where the egos come in. If you look at Lamine Yamal, for example, last season, he ended it really well. But ever since then, I think the ego has become a little bit too big. When you look at his Nations League final performance, when you look at his performance versus PSG and his performance versus Madrid, I saw similar stuff with Desiree Doué. After that Champions League final, I felt stuff came to his ego. Not that he was complete garbage, but he wasn't performing at that same level until he got that injury, got back motivation and hunger, and has come back with absolute fire. So I think sometimes you need bad stuff to happen to get a reaction. As we saw with the Laporta and Lamine Yamal stuff, everything had to go really bad. Barca lost, Yamal had a poor performance, and finally Barcelona stepped in. And I think that's the position Barca are at the moment. It's getting so bad that people have to start stepping in and changing stuff. And I think Hansi Flick, as we have in front of us, he has to change a little bit. The players have to change a little bit. The management is already changing stuff. So I definitely see the improvement coming. And lastly but not least, I want to end it on this. I've seen a lot of comparisons to Paris Saint-Germain's incredible, miraculous Champions League comeback last season. And I don't like how people are using as an example. Paris Saint-Germain were an anomaly. You would never see a team 25th in the Champions League table and then go on to win the Champions League with a really tough group stage and a really tough knockout stage. But it's very clear that FC Barcelona is underperforming. They're not performing at the level they should be. Maybe some people say the purple patch is over or something. No, FC Barcelona are just struggling in the beginning of the season for many valid reasons, and I think majority of them are going to change in the upcoming weeks. Lewandowski, Rafinha, Juan Garcia being back is absolutely huge. It's going to help the defense. It's going to help the attack. And then I think it's some stuff on Hansi Flick. He has to pick a centre-back pairing to stick with for the rest of the season. He got to give Kunde a rest, play Eric Garcia as a right back, get Kunde back to his level, and then fix the midfield partner. Do not play De Jong anymore, man. I'm not a Barca fan, but whenever I see De Jong on that team sheet, I'm like, do these people understand football? Are they watching the same games as us? De Jong is absolutely horrendous and is absolutely useless in that midfield. At many points, you would think FC Barcelona are playing with 10 players with De Jong in that midfield. So I think all of these problems will either be fixed or have already been fixed, and FC Barcelona will somewhat come back to their previous level of last season. Last season, I predicted they were going to regress a little bit since last season because I thought they were overperforming a lot, but I never thought they would be this bad, especially this early on. But yeah, we'll see in the upcoming weeks if all of this was right, which it probably is. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and as usual, allez, Paris.